Welcome back everyone to another Technique Coding programming tutorial. In this video, we're going to be going over the same iOS authentication app, but we're going to be doing it in SwiftUI. Now, everyone always knows new is always better. Okay, I'll be honest, that's not always the truth, but most people are going to be using SwiftUI when it comes to new projects. So I wanted to recreate this project in SwiftUI to show everyone how to do this properly. We're going to be going over the coordinator pattern again, but in SwiftUI this time. This is probably the way that I would use it. I don't actually use SwiftUI navigation in my client projects. I use UIKit navigation, and all the views are in SwiftUI. But that's not to say you can't use SwiftUI navigation. So I'm going to show you how to do that in this video as well. Basically, it's going to be looking the exact same minus a couple visual changes, just because of how SwiftUI works. Same thing. We're just going to be able to say, type some stuff in here, submit it. It's going to go to this page. We're going to fetch the same data as last time. We can reset the text. This fetch secured data, if you haven't watched the UIKit versions, it's fetching using the authentication token to fetch a string, which is you are logged in, from the backend server, and we can reset the text and then fetch it again, and then do this as many times as we want. We can log out. We can register. If we click on register, we can hit the registration screen. We can register. We can go back to the login using this method, or we can click back to go backwards, back to the login screen. Navigation is a little wonky sometimes in SwiftUI. That's why you see if you go to register, then log in again, then register, log in. We might fix this here, but for the most part, we're not gonna delve too much in the navigation, just because the point of this video is for the auth. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So the first thing that we want to do is create the new project. So in my other screen here, to click open the create project dialog. And we could use multi-platform. Multi-platform requires SwiftUI. But for the sake of consistency, I'm going to use the same tab that the UIKit version did. And I'm going to say new iOS app. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to name this iOS auth SwiftUI. We're not going to include tests. We're not going to need hosting in CloudKit. We can't even click on that. We're going to hit next. We're going to save that in our recording area. We're not going to use Git for this. It's handled elsewhere. So first thing to note is, unlike the UIKit version, we don't actually have to go into the info.plist area to adjust anything. We're just ready to go. Like on all my projects, the first thing I do is I start with a screens group. And for this one, I'm also going to have a shared views group. Because SwiftUI is very composable, we're going to have a few field views that we're going to use to populate these screens with fields. And then I am going to sort these guys. And eventually we're going to get rid of this content view in favor of the coordinator. But for this part, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a screen with some fields. And if we have time, I'll just keep going. So the first thing we want to do is we actually want to make a couple fields to make our lives easier. Same thing in the UIKit app. We're going to make our boilerplate first and then use that to create the screens. In the UIKit version, we went over creating views and creating code to help us pin those views to the screen. SwiftUI is a little bit, actually I should say a lot more convenient when it comes to creating views, which is why I personally use it on my screens, just not the navigation part. Unlike the UIKit version, which we had probably 5 or 6 different files to help support us making views in the boilerplate, we really just need 3. So the first one we're going to make is called an email field. And just a little bit of a convenience for us. So this is going to take a binding, the value of the actual, what the user types in basically is the value. We say var placeholder, give me a string equals email. And then right in here, what we're going to do is we're going to say text field, and we're going to do this. We're going to say This is the placeholder. I'm going to close this down just a little bit to give us a little bit more room. Maybe this too. And we're going to do $value. And that's the field. Failed to build. It's probably complaining that we don't have the value here. Constant. Say done at example.com just as a placeholder. And cool, we have our email field right here. And if we click on this, because this is a live, we're running this in the live preview, we can actually navigate around. Oh, moving around on me. Should be able to interact with it. Might be because of this, maybe. In any case, not gonna be too crazy about that. So one thing we want to do is we need to create. We want to create a certain style for this before we move on. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna say text field styles, because we want to get to the point where our fields either have this little border with a curved edges right there. That's what we're targeting right there. We also want the placeholder to be in the center, and we want the text to be able to be typed in with maybe a little bit of padding around the cursor. So that's a target right now. So we do that by creating a custom text field or text field style. So we're going to say new file. It's going to be just a regular Swift file. We're going to call it default text field style. Import SwiftUI. Style is going to be of the type text field style. Say func body. And this is how you create style. So you say configuration. We're going to say dot padding, horizontal. It's going to be 5. We don't want to go too crazy. We don't want to completely clip off the editable area for the user to type in. We're going to say dot padding. Vertical is going to be 10. A little nicer. We're also going to say clip shape. Rounded rectangle. Nope, we want corner radius style. Be 5. Now there's a couple different uses for the clip shape. In this case, what we're doing is we're making sure that the inside of our view doesn't bleed out. So we're clipping the inside view part so our rounded corners will show properly. So we're going to say overlay rounded, and this is what's actually going to show the rounded border right here. Say corner radius is 5. We don't need the style part here. We can just delete that. And then we're going to say dot stroke. Say stroke. It's going to be a black stroke, and it's going to be line width. It's going to be 1. Right there. Cool. Now what we want to do is we can test this if we just do preview. We're going to do a quick VStack here. Text field. We're just going to say email. Constant is just going to be an empty string just so we can see the placeholder values a little bit easier. I'm going to say text field style. And we're going to say default text field style, the one we just made. And we're going to say dot padding, horizontal, say 5, just for a little bit of extra padding here. So it should build. I have to actually rebuild the project here for it to do it. Let's refresh it to see if it works. No, all right, we're going to build, see if we have any build errors. Sometimes the previews won't rebuild until you rebuild the project, and then you hit refresh. And there we go. So that's what we need. So we can type in this, everything we need, and then perfect. See, once you get just a couple things working in SwiftUI, it's so much easier. UIKit has gotten much easier after the boilerplate in programmatic UI and using previews, but it's just SwiftUI is just always going to be quicker until you get to very complex views. That's the only thing I would say UIKit is still much better at. If it's extremely complex, UIKit may still be the better choice because it's more consistent and just well-rounded, and it's time-tested. SwiftUI, though, if you can make it work in SwiftUI and it works well, I'd say just stick with SwiftUI personally. So now that we've done that, we can go back to our email field here, and we can apply that same text field style. Text field styles down here. Default text field style. And then it should refresh here, hopefully in a second. Got this. So if we delete it, we have the email placeholder. Then if we just start typing, some beeping there. Okay, cool. So what we want to do now is we want to actually format this field so that when the keyboard comes up, the keyboard shows in a way that helps the user enter an email. So we're going to say text content type, say email address, and then we're also going to say text input auto capitalization, and we're going to say never. Now, again, just like in the UIKit version, we don't want the keyboard when it shows to automatically default to the first character being capitalized, because if the backend doesn't check for that or forces that text to be all lowercase before saving it in the database, you will get character case conflicts. Say that 10 times fast. Character case conflicts. Anyway, so that's a big point. While the backend should be handling that, we want to code in a defensive way. It's called defensive coding. And we do that by saying, the client's also going to be in charge of saying, we're going to automatically make sure that this doesn't accidentally get capitalized. It's a little bit easier for the user to input it, but anyway, in the model layer, we're also going to force it to lowercase anyway as another sanity check, but it's always beneficial to do this from the visual side as well. So our email field is done. And honestly, we just have one more field. So we're going to actually create a password field. And the nice thing about SwiftUI as well, just like in UIKit, SwiftUI has a built-in field to handle passwords. Let's see, binding var value. We're going to recreate the same type of stuff that we made on the email field. Placeholder string equals password. And we're going to say this is actually going to be a secure field. Say placeholder, and it's going to be a value. Make sure we get that $sign. Again, if you're not familiar with SwiftUI, this $sign just is an accessor for the publisher. So because this value, if you just typed in value, it would be the actual value that's stored within this publisher, or I should say binding, really. But if you actually do the $sign, you'll notice if I do $sign value, it'll actually give us the binding right here, which is what we want. So the secure field will automatically handle transforming anything we type to the little dots that show up to hide what you type in for the password. So for this one, again, we're going to say text field style. We're going to say default text field style like we said before. And this time we're going to say text input auto capitalization is never. Again. Cool. So if that will reload here, we're going to have to rebuild the project again real quick, and failed because we didn't actually give the value in here. We're just going to say tester123 as an example. Let's try to refresh this. Boom, there we go. All right, so we can type in here. If we delete it, it goes back to password. So those are our two fields. That's really it. That's all you need to do. The secure field handles everything for us. We don't have to. In UIKit, we still had to use a UI text field, and then we had to actually explicitly state we want this to be a secure field. We want this to be a password field. But in SwiftUI, it just comes out of the box with a secure field that you can use that handles all that configuration for us. The other thing we really had to worry about is the capitalization. and the text field style. Actually, I should probably take a look into this, but we might not need this, the text input auto capitalization, because we're using a secure field that might already be in place. But just for the sake of it, as a sanity check, I'm going to set this to never right here anyway. So that's our boilerplate. That's it. We're done with that. So we're going to create a login view right now. So we're going to say new group, and we're going to do login. And then we're going to say new file. It's going to be a SwiftUI file. Oh, nope. Wrong one, Rob. SwiftUI file. Login view. And the whole point of this is we want to just get something on screen right now. So, and then we're going to replace this content view with our login view. Okay. So just for the fields, what we're going to do is we're going to have a V stack. We're going to place everything vertically. Remember, our target's this, so we're going to have a V stack. So all of our views are going to be listed straight up and down, and we're going to end up plopping all these in the center, and we're going to have a register button down towards the bottom. So to do that, what we do is we have this V stack. We're actually going to say spacer first. If we don't do that, what's going to happen is, I'll show you here in a second. We're going to say email field. And we're just going to have a constant right now just for the sake of the view. Then we're going to say password field value is constant. And then we have a button. And we're going to do stuff here in a minute. And then we're going to have a registration button. Now, technically speaking, this would work. We could just leave it here like this, but we're going to actually split this up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to add a spacer because we want this register button to be at the bottom. So this is going to force them all over the place like this. Now, to push this back down, what we're going to do is we're going to add a spacer up here. And this is going to force our text to be right there in the center. Now, it's too flush to the sides, so we're just going to come down here to the V stack real quick. We're going to say frame. Oh, we could add padding. We could say either frame width 250, or we could say, padding dot horizontal, and you'll say like 50, I guess, to do it like that. Personally, because we're going to be working with different sized screens, you could do one of a couple things here. You could either set the frame itself, or you could make a calculation up here outside of the body on making this a proportion to the screen width. For the sake of this, we're just going to use the frame to keep everything nice and consistent. And there we go. Okay, so there's our login view. We're done. Actually, you know what? Let's just keep going and make these other three screens, the visuals on the other screens real quick. So let's hop into here. Let's go and create a new group. We're gonna call this one home. I'm gonna make another group, and we're gonna call this one register. Because I like things being organized, we're gonna sort that by name. I hit the name button. All right, so we're gonna create a new HomeView file. Okay, and what you'll notice is a lot of the SwiftUI stuff you'll just crush through it. So V stack. Now to just give us a little visual on this screen, what our target is. Let's log in real quick. So we want this. We want text, a button, 2 buttons, and 3 buttons. So it's going to look pretty close to being the same. let's see. So we want to go, oh, one thing before I move into this is we want to actually set the navigation title on this. When we plop this in the navigation, we want the title to be up top. To do that, we have to actually say navigation title, that's login. And this right here will tell any navigation stack that it's in that give me the name of login. Kind of like in UIKit, how inside the view controller, you do self.title equals what have you. This is kind of the same thing. The actual view itself is telling whatever it's embedded in how to display its name up top. So, okay, so back into the home view. Just gonna crush this. We're gonna say, same thing, we're gonna say text. And we're gonna say info text as a placeholder here. Then we're gonna say button, fetch, secure data. And then we're gonna leave this open for right now. We have another button that says reset text, like this. And then a final button, that's the logout button. There's our entire screen, and I spelt stuff wrong here. So again, we're gonna space some of these things out. So we want the logout button to be at the bottom. So we're gonna say spacer. And then same thing, we want to push the middle area, the middle views, well, the views that should be in the middle, down to the middle. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna make this a little bit more neat. So we're gonna say for the text, this is gonna span a couple different lines. As you can see from the actual example here, it's gonna span a couple different lines. So we want to say multi-line alignment center. And then we want the padding on the bottom. We're gonna say 10 just to space things out a little bit. For this button, we're gonna do the same thing. Actually, what I can do is just copy this down here. And then we're gonna do the same thing for the logout button just to make sure it doesn't not too flush down there. I'm gonna refresh this. Okay. Okay, so now same thing we did on the login view. We need to say navigation title. We're gonna say home. And we're gonna say dot navigation back button hidden. Navigation bar back button to hidden. Because we're gonna be pushing this on the screen, we don't want them just hitting a back button to get to the login screen. They actually should hit the logout button because there could be extra functionality hit on this button. And there it is. There's our home view. Let's just keep going. We're gonna create a new view called RegisterView. Okay. Same thing here. We're gonna have a VStack. And for the sake of it, we're gonna show you what this is gonna look like. Just like this, 3 fields, 2 buttons. So we're gonna say email field. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna copy most of this from the login screen, go back into the register screen, paste that in. They'll give us a little bit to work with before we get going. And we're gonna have 2 password fields. This one is going to have a placeholder of firm password. Close this down, give us some more space here. Okay, now we're gonna have some padding on this. So we're gonna say dot padding bottom 10. Give that to all of the views. And then this is going to be a register button. This is going to be a login button. And then the same thing we did on the other one, we're going to say that the frame on this width is 250. Now we didn't do this on the home screen because the buttons are just going to take up the entire width, and that info text we want as much to be on screen as possible, so we just let it span across the entire width. We didn't actually have a field. If we did, we would have adjusted the screens accordingly. And then we say navigation title is register. There's a registration screen. We're good. So now what we want to do is we want to make this at least a little bit functional. And we're going to add ViewModels to this. But first, what I want to do is I want to show something on screen and just build this. So we're going to go up here to, we're going to actually remove this content view altogether. We don't need this. We're going to go up to this SwiftUI app, and then we're just going to show the login view right there. Okay, so let's run this. Let's do the 15 plus here. Don't want to step on toes of the other simulator that I have running. Okay, so it built fine. We have everything on screen here. Now, note that we don't have a navigation title up here yet, even though we declared one, because this is not embedded in a navigation stack yet. We'll be doing that here in probably in another video. If we have time, I might get to that today, but once it's embedded in a navigation stack, we'll be fine. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create view models for these so we can actually handle the interactions. So let's start off with a login view right here. We're going to say new file, Swift file, login model. And same thing for like how we did the view models in the UIKit version. We're going to say extension login view. Say class view model. In this case, what we want to do is we want to import SwiftUI. We also want to import combine. And here we're going to say this is going to be an observable object. And then because we need parameters for the view to use, we're going to say at published var email published var password. We're going to say, we'll leave it at that for right now. The other thing we're going to need, and we can define right here too, is we need to declare a protocol, just like on how we handled the coordinator pattern in our UIKit app. We're going to create delegates that this view model can then talk to handle navigation for us. So we're basically passing all the actions from the view model back to the coordinator that will essentially be an object that passes views to our main root view essentially, and then it will handle the navigation. So we're going to say protocol login nav delegate, say any object. It's going to be func on register tapped on successful. And then we're going to say make var nav delegate login nav delegate. Now we may or may not, I'll probably wait till the next video to connect all these, but we just want this in place so we can actually assign actions from the view. And that's all we need. So then down here, what we're going to say is we're going to say mark actions extension login view view model, and there should be only two actions here, and we're going to say on login tapped on register tapped. And then just, this is not going to get hooked up like I said, but we're going to say nav delegate on login successful for right now. Say nav delegate on register tapped. Okay. So then inside the login view, what we're going to do is we're going to say state object. our view model state object, because this view owns this object. Every time the view refreshes, we should not have this view model also refresh. Okay, so now we're going to change this to ViewModel.email. ViewModel.password. And inside this submit button, we're going to say ViewModel.on login tapped. And then inside the register button, ViewModel.on register tapped. And we've hooked it up. Now we want to make sure we actually handle this correctly. So we're going to say ViewModel.init so our previews load correctly. So now we're going to build real quick just to clear out. I usually just build one so we can handle this. But two, if I build it, then I am assured that the next time I hit this refresh button, it's more likely that it's going to actually build correctly and show previews. So now that we have this, we can type in blow this up a little bit. Cool. I love these interactive previews. It makes it so nice. So this text is actually using the view model right now. So this is being stored inside the login view model as email. That's what's super nice about these previews. We don't actually have to hook up everything and build and run the project. We can just use this. Now, previews does get a little hairy with more complex views. If you have a whole dashboard, for instance, and you got to kind of play around with it. Usually in production, what I'll do is I'll have a build configuration set up for sample data, because when you are using previews, you don't want the previews build to load third-party packages, try to make network requests. I usually have it so it loads up sample data as well, so it will load faster. There's a bunch of infrastructure you should put in place if you're going to be planning on using these SwiftUI previews with very complex data sets or views, or you have a huge setup process. It can get kind of hairy, but for simplistic stuff, you don't really have to worry about that. And it works really nice. So, all right, let's move on. We're going to do the HomeView next. We're going to say new file, HomeView model. Okay, same thing. We're going to import SwiftUI, import combine, say extension, HomeView, class view model, observable object. This one's going to have a published var info text. And for the sake of it, we're going to actually say let default info text equals app fetch button to fetch secured data in this. And then we're going to say have that nav delegate functions up here. Home nav delegate object, just to set up a little bit, this a little bit. There's only going to be one function here. It's going to be but there's going to be more actions, but we only have one navigation action. Okay, so for this one, we are going to have delegate HomeView.viewModel. I have a couple actions here. I'm going to have a on reset info text tapped. And this one we can actually implement right now. All this is just info text equals default info text. That's it. We're going to have a on fetch secure data tapped. We can't really implement this right now, but for the sake of it, we could do a little mock and just say info text equals secure data here, pretty much whatever. Then we're gonna have one more. It's the logout button. We're gonna say nav. Don't have a nav delegate up here yet, so we're gonna say var nav delegate. Say nav delegate dot on logout tapped. Okay, so that's it for the view model. So like we said, but like we did before, we're gonna go back over to the view, the home view here, and we're gonna set it up. So the first thing we need to do is actually say state object our view model type view model, and so we don't have any errors, we're gonna add this down here, that in it. Okay, moving back up, we are just going to change. So this info text right here is going to come from the view model itself. So we're going to say ViewModel.info text. The button, so we're going to say ViewModel.on fetch secure data tapped. It's complaining about our text here. There we go. It didn't want a binding, it just wanted a piece of text. But because we're observing the view model, when that published property changes, it'll still refresh the view and change this text when it changes. Okay, so for the reset, we're going to say view model on reset info text tapped. The logout, same thing, view model on logout tapped. Nice thing is that when we hit reset text, fetch secure text, it's working right now. Like as you can see, it is using the view model right in the previews, which is super nice. Like I really do like this. So that's all set up. We're good to go. Hitting logout will work again when it's hooked up to the navigation. We also don't see the title up here because in the previews, it's never embedded in a navigation view unless we explicitly do that within the previews area down here. So we'll finish off with this by creating the RegisterView model. Okay, so going through, you know what I'll do this time? It's going to be some of this stuff here to save us some time. Here, this is going to be register nav delegate. And copy this down here. This can all go away. And we're going to have 3 published properties called @published our email equals string. If I didn't explain this before, this @published, what's it complaining about? We got to rename this. So if I didn't explain this before, this @published is a wrapper, if I can remember the term right. And this basically makes it so this becomes a publisher. So things can other objects can subscribe to changes to it, which is what SwiftUI does. This observable object right here basically turns this view model into something that SwiftUI can use to observe and then update its views accordingly. You don't want to go overboard on this by having a ton of published properties inside of a SwiftUI view, especially if you're using SwiftUI navigation. If you're using UIKit navigation, each SwiftUI view that's wrapped in a hosting controller is kind of sandboxed, so you don't have to worry about the reactivity of the data affecting other screens as much as you do inside of an actual SwiftUI app that is all SwiftUI. So be careful, read up on SwiftUI optimizations and read a little bit more in depth on that. SwiftUI can be very unforgiving when you are using data flows in here with all of these observable objects, and you don't take into consideration when views update. You can get into issues where navigation starts acting weird, inconsistent, or even unpredictable. So read up on, and I might go in depth on that in another video, but read up on how SwiftUI, how it updates the views, when it updates the views, and certain considerations you need to have when building fully SwiftUI apps. So within this, we're gonna have just two actions here. Oop. Register view. There you go, Rob. Dot ViewModel. Register tapped. Bunk this up a little bit. Bunk on tapped. Let me say nav delegate dot here, register nav delegate. We don't actually have anything up here yet. So we're going to say func on register complete. Delegate on register complete. Delegate on login tapped. Cool. So now again, this is a lot of the stuff for these simple views is just the same stuff over and over again. Especially if you use the same architectural patterns, it's just, you just get in the zone, you just start typing because you already know how it's going to be architected. You already have gone through the motions a lot more. So it can be tedious, but it's just, consistent typing, consistent way of building views. It makes your life a whole lot easier, to be honest. Like, you don't feel as tired at the end of the day if everything is just architected the same way. Plus, being very consistent is going to save your time, money, stress, hair, in the long run. You don't want to get, I don't like creating views that are architected too different than anything else, because it's just so much easier to keep things consistent. I know I'm kind of rambling right now, but I can't harp on this enough. The more consistent you are, even if you don't know how to do something, as long as you're consistent with how you figure it out and across the entire code base, when you learn a proper fix for it, you can just go work back and apply that fix the exact same way across the entire code base. So people say, oh, I didn't want to push something on the keyboard here. ViewModel on login tapped. Let's see, it's anything, and then down here we just want to say ViewModel and initialize it, and it's good. There. Tab over. Cool. So I have time today, but basically what we did as an overview is we created the SwiftUI version of the project. We created some shared views here. Also created the style that we're going to be using for every single field. And then we just banged out each view and the view model, and we've got a basic app ready to go. In the next video, we're going to set up the coordinator pattern, and it's not going to take that long. Like, we might even actually finish this tomorrow, like in the next video, because I'm just going to import all of the model layer stuff. The model layer stuff would have taken probably another video, but I'm just going to import what we already have. I will review it a little bit, but we'll set up all the navigation in the next video. We will probably have time to set up the actual network layer as well. So 2 videos SwiftUI. Like, this is the nice thing about SwiftUI is you don't have to worry too much about connecting all the views as far as pinning constraints. moving them around on screen or creating the boilerplate. It's so quick once you know what you're doing that you can prototype pretty quick. So in any case, hope everyone enjoyed the video. In the next one, like I said, we're going to be even potentially finishing it, but let me know in the comments if you have any questions, concerns, if you want to see anything else added to this, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy coding.